This episode of No Time Like Joe Time is sponsored by Fate in Flames on Kindle Vella. Rena has grown up sheltered and cut off from the world, caring for her ailing mother. When fate catches up with her, she is thrust into a world of magic and intrigue she never knew existed, and the heritage she is not quite sure of. Read Fate in Flames on Kindle Vella.
Welcome to No Time Like Joe Time, where TV gets deep for no reason. I'm Generic Joe, here to say the same thing each time before you listen to an episode. You can find No Time Like Joe Time wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. I'm just that generous and kind of a guy. Please rate, please like, subscribe, and comment, because I'm magic. It also really helps grow the show, and I've loved the conversations I'm having. So maybe you can help your old friend Joe. Now, if you, and I mean just you, want to be a guest, you can email me at notimelikejoetime@gmail.com. Love to have you on, figure out what show you like, and then we'll have a meaningful discussion. All right, let's get to the episode.
Like what you are listening to? Check out Lazenlow on Spotify Music, a new and upcoming local band from Minnesota.
I'm going to First Avenue, what can I do?
Welcome to No Time Like Joe Time, where we look at different media to learn from thus said media, like how to make a citizen's arrest, or to have a mean whistling opening. Each week I bring in a new guest to help me with this adventure. This week, I really don't know what I did to get such an amazing, cool guest. She's a classically trained cellist.
Cellist.
Cellist?
Cellist.
Cellist. She is good at English. She's a former college professor with her PhD, multi-instrumental rock musician, and perhaps most importantly, a mother of 2 grown kids. And now a published author of the book, The Overthinking Chronicles. I mean, my goodness, everyone. If she asks, say I'm a doctor. But it's truly an honor to have her on the podcast as we look at the Andy Griffith show. Please welcome Sarah Glasco. Thank you so much, Sarah, for being here.
Well, thanks for having me, Joe.
Of course. I wanted to ask you, what is your area of expertise?
Ooh, I mean, like you said, I have a PhD, but really, I always had imposter syndrome with all that stuff. So, I tend to think of myself as a world-class nail biter, really good at anxiety.
Yeah, I had no idea you could take a class like that. Well, it's truly a treat because I'm really excited to have a fellow professor with me.
Well, again, like I said, thanks for having me. Wait a minute, what? Are you a professor?
Editing Joe here. What you're about to see is a world-class example of idiocy. You see, I write the script to every bit in the beginning. So that was scripted for Sarah to say, "Oh, I didn't know you were a professor." And my response was supposed to be, I'm basically a professor. Let's see how Recording Joe handles this. Oh no, that's part of the bit.
I know that I was going along with it.
I'm an idiot. You're so good. I have to live with me, guys. I have to live with me. Thanks, Sarah, for being a champ. Well, I'm basically a professor. I'm the host of this podcast, and it carries the same weight. Maybe even more some.
Oh, okay. I guess I never saw it that way, but okay.
Yeah, I tell you, a lot of people really look up to me. Anyone can just make a podcast. You really have to know your stuff. Just to prove it to you, why don't you go ahead and ask me anything tech related?
Ooh. I mean, I'm not really a techie. Okay. Okay. Well, this is an easy one. How does a bit rate affect audio quality in podcasting? And what bit rates are typically recommended for different types of podcasts? Because I'm doing I'm working on one with a friend right now. Ours isn't launched yet. So you're the expert, Joe.
You're right. I mean, experts, maybe even an undersell of it. Yeah, you're right. This is an easy one. You see, Sarah, if you just do a bit of podcasting, you will have short videos or less content. Pretty basic. Surprised you had to ask. Go ahead, ask me another one.
Oh, wow. Okay. God, I wasn't like expecting to have to talk tech tonight. Let's see.
That's all right.
How do you handle audio normalization and leveling to ensure consistent volumes, like volume levels across a podcast episode? How do you do that?
Going with another simple one, huh? Well,
so easy.
I usually yell at my guests to raise their volume and stop acting like a little mouse. Or
really?
I tell them, oh yeah, all the time. Or I tell them to tune it down because my ears are bleeding.
Oh,
yeah, easy. Come on, let's go with a hard one.
Okay. Because I'm new to this. So like, how can podcasters who don't know anything about this, how can we optimize our RSS feeds for better visibility and discoverability? What is so funny?
Well, I'm really glad you came here, Sarah.
What is so funny about that?
Well, I think I was meant
I mean, I know I'm hilarious, but come on.
Well, allow me to explain. You see, I think I was meant to teach you all about these basic questions. You see, boats like the RSS or the Liberty or whatever big ship you are on may pick up radio signals, but podcasts don't broadcast on the radio, Sarah. So you can't optimize for the RSS feed or whatever boat.
What? Wait a minute. Okay, hold on. I don't get it. Like, I'm not trying to be rude, but like, none of your answers, no offense, Joe, none of your answers, like, they don't really make sense.
Well, all right, fine. I don't know much about tech. I just really wanted to impress you, Sarah. You probably think I'm a real doofus.
Oh, no. I mean, not at all. You don't need to impress me, Joe. Just be yourself, dude. Come on.
Oh,
like,
shucks.
Seriously.
Shucks, thanks. All right. No more trying to make myself look good or making up answers. And there is something I do know that I really like to share.
Oh, please. By all means.
So you see this thing here?
Uh-huh.
Okay. So that
Did you get that for the eclipse?
Wait. Huh. I guess two reasons it's here. So it's a fly chaser. Flies are naturally attracted to microphones. And as people know, they're very self-absorbed. It keeps them from landing on the mic. I also use it as a fly swatter.
So your expertise, Joe, is being the butt of all the jokes. Like, your talent is happily highlighting your areas for improvement in your life. Is that right?
Yep, exactly.
Is that where we're going here?
Yep. Wait, what? Okay. Thank you so much.
You do like some serious editing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Luckily, I really like the editing part. Otherwise, I think.
Me too. I love editing.
Yeah. It's so, I don't know.
I hyper focus on that. I love it.
Yeah. Me too. It's like my happy place.
Yeah, totally.
So then what I do from here, I kind of just start talking when I'm editing. I'm like, where's a good spot to jump in? But that was super fun because I feel like you were one of the most committed people, because some people
do like acting.
I could tell. I'm like right away.
I
I
have
might
like theater and improv experience in my youth.
so want to take an improv class. I'm gonna put this in at the end of the episode, but Sarah was so good. She was reading the bit, and she thought I was a real professor. So I was like, "Oh no, I'm not." And she was like, "No, I'm just reading the line you gave me." Uh, but all seriousness, really, thank you for being here.
Oh, you're welcome.
You
My
you are
pleasure.
the first person who's not in my friend group to
Aw,
join the podcast. So
I'm
it's
honored.
it's a Joe time first. It's also like my nerves are full blast. I'm glad I did this like 11 times before, 12 times. Otherwise, I'd be a wreck.
Joe, it's time to expand.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think
Expansion starts now.
I should just like let you lead this because you are so much more energetic and like I'm waiting. I have a weird sense of humor, and this is
Join
going
the
to kind
club.
of lead me to your book. My sense of humor is I'd love it if people were like, Sarah was such a great guest. Why is Joe still hosting? And I'm like, yes, I love that. But I do want to quickly talk about your book before we
Yeah.
begin. The Overthinking Chronicles.
Yeah, I have it right
Oh,
here.
perfect. I was going to put a picture in, but you have it even better. Um,
Yeah, I've read my own book like 20 times.
that's good. I was telling you before we started recording, there's not a lot of books that I'm like, I mean, I do like to try to learn. I have a lot of like leadership books and
Mhm.
stuff like that. And occasionally one hits me. Other times I'm like, oh, I got a nugget here. With your book, I almost felt like we were having a conversation.
That is like what I was going for, you know?
Yeah, it was. I struggled with a lot of very similar things that you were talking about.
Mhm.
Growing up with severe depression, anxiety. I always say, oh, the big ones we all enjoy together. And for so long, I thought that was just me.
Yeah, I think like what I've discovered recently is just like no matter how much you think you're alone, you
Yeah.
never really are. Like there are so many people out there silently struggling and
Yeah.
we just don't realize
Yeah.
how prevalent mental illness and mental, just general mental wellness
Yeah.
problems are
Yeah.
globally.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know if I told you this. I might have, but so I'm a peer support specialist. So
Yeah.
I work with people who are like in the criminal justice
Mhm.
and kind of use my story to share. I think a lot of them are learning for the first time you can address these emotions.
Yeah.
And I always say giving people permission. I know it sounds silly, but you do give people permission to feel that. And I think people need that. I really do think people need to be told it's okay to take time and like if it hurts, it's okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's unfortunate that we need permission, but I think the need for permission is just a testament to how we were taught
Mhm.
as a society to suppress all that, and it was
Yeah.
really stigmatized when
Yeah.
we were younger. I mean, it's really only in recent years, like my kids are so emotionally mature
Mm,
compared to me,
yeah.
when at that age. And they
Yeah.
just like, but I also think, I think I sort of, I broke a cycle. I didn't have abusive parents, but
Hmm.
I'm Gen X. Like I had parents that just were we were just more or less raised by wolves,
Yeah.
and like my parents didn't display a lot of, uh, you know,
Hmm.
I don't know, positive emotion. Just, we weren't a huggy, touchy-feely, I love you
Yeah.
family. We didn't wear our emotions on our sleeves. And
Right.
so I had to learn how to show people my feelings really like as an adult. I had tried to start learning that as a teenager. It was very hard
Yeah.
when you've been a child and, you're
Yeah.
not getting, any really emotional availability from your parents. But,
Right.
you
Well,
know,
that totally makes sense. Thank you for sharing. And one of my favorite things about like when, if, I hope it's okay I share this with you, but
yeah.
part of the reason I became a peer support specialist is when I was 30, our son was born premature and he needed to have a trach. I was in a very difficult job and I ended up having a mental breakdown and I had to be hospitalized. And then afterwards, I attended day treatment, and there was like somebody from the University of Minnesota who had a straight A, like GPA. There were nurses and all these people. I never thought this impacted them. So hearing like everything you've accomplished and seeing like, oh, anybody can experience this. There's this sense of, oh, I'm okay.
Yeah.
And I think that's really good. But I think what I loved most about this is you also tackle it with humor.
Yeah. That's just so important to me.
Yes.
Like, laughter is medicine.
Yeah. And I like you always break down things in bullet points, which is super helpful for me.
ADHD, like, man. I got to talk to my people, Yeah.
And I just, as I was reading it and just like, kind of the one thing I really liked, you're talking about self-deprecating humor, but doing it in a way that doesn't diminish you.
Yeah, you have to, there's a delicate balance. And I actually did research about that for the book. Because I was like, I really want to do this through the lens of humor, but my humor is so self-deprecating sometimes. And when I was younger, it can be a real turnoff, if you just have to know when to stop, because I think you can, if you take it too far, it makes people really uncomfortable, I mean, they don't want to hear you talking. Are we allowed to curse on this?
You can curse as much as you want.
Okay. I mean, but people don't want to hear you talking shit about yourself. It's uncomfortable. And that general lack of confidence is one thing. You can kind of make fun of yourself. But I think when you go that low and dark on yourself, when your self-talk is that negative, it really does. Your whole aura is just negative, and people just see that lack of confidence, and frankly, it's not attractive, and I think even, if you take it too far, it can frighten people because they don't know. They don't know how to deal with it.
Right. Right. No,
so I researched, like, I was like, shit, I really want to do self-deprecating humor, but like, what if there's research? I need to research this, because what if there's research out there that actually says it's like bad for you? And then I like write this book and like, self-deprecating humor is my savior. And then people, come back at me with all these cited research studies going like, you're full of crap. It's really bad for you. It's not going to help you. So but the research does show that there is, that when used in moderation and when done, lightly, that it really does help a lot.
Yeah, definitely. It reminds me, so I have I call it a quieter second podcast that I'm not really promoting. It's just kind of word of mouth. It's two voices, one story. It's my wife and I, where we're talking about really personal struggles we've gone through.
That's a great title.
Oh, thank you. And
that's a great premise too.
Yeah, it's been really good. The first season was my mental health breakdown. The second season was about my son, Jack. And those were both really deep seasons.
Are those public? Are they out?
Yes, they are.
Please send me the links. I will share that podcast. We need more men talking openly about mental health. It's so stigmatized for everybody, but I'm like all about smashing patriarchy, and I'm constantly like, I'm misogynistic, blah, blah, sexist. But I think men do men do have it worse
Yeah.
when it comes to the stigma of mental health. And that is just because of
Mhm.
a misogynistic, chauvinistic, that's just ingrained in our culture that men are
Yeah.
supposed to be, that we equivocate like not crying and not showing feelings with strength.
Yeah.
And honestly, if you can cry and show feelings and, be
Yeah.
vulnerable like that, that's about as
Yeah.
strong as I think you can be. So
Yeah.
I will post that to my Instagram and
Oh,
share that.
thank you very much. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. But the new season we're doing, it's called Find the Humor. And
Oh, awesome.
it's so like the first episode, so I've had night terrors through most of my life.
Yeah.
And as a high schooler, I was mortified by them. And I'd often, my family didn't understand that it was a medical condition. So they always got
Yeah.
really, really mad at me.
Oh my
Had
gosh,
the
I'm
night terror.
so sorry.
And I
I'm
always
so
say,
sorry. My
and I always,
son had night terrors.
oh,
I mean, he's 23 now, so I don't
yeah,
know if he still gets them, but he still had them. He wasn't, he still was having them when he was like an adolescent,
yeah,
So, and it's just like those blood curdling screams.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I learned because he was in therapy, like I learned, very quickly that like one of the worst things you can do actually is wake the person up from
yeah,
a night terror. And it's
yeah,
counterintuitive.
right.
The first thing you think you should do is wake them up and like, but that is like anyway,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. ADHD
Oh,
interrupting.
no,
Go on. Go
I
on.
love this. This is great. But I started to talk about like the first time I realized it could be used for good and humor is I was on this trip with tons of high schoolers,
Mhm.
and we were like sardined in. There was like 50 high schoolers, and I had a night terror.
Oh God. That's tough.
And I, it, it's funny. I remember the dream. The dream was just a raccoon got through a garage door. That was it. But then I got up and I started yelling, rocks, rocks, rocks. And the next day I was so embarrassed, but I started talking to people, and like some of the cool, tough guys were like, I was hiding underneath my sleeping bag. And suddenly I was like, wait, we're all kind of laughing at this together. They're not
Yeah.
laughing at me. And so
That's so
suddenly
awesome.
there was this humor to it. And yeah, so that humor part is good. And the self-deprecating, I think, like you said, done right. One person who I always think about who kind of has this aura I was trying to put out there at the beginning bit is Barney Fi, I believe it is.
Barney Fife from
From Andy Griffith's
Andy
show.
Griffith. Oh yeah.
He's got, I think, one of the Don Knotts is just one of my favorite. We've watched all his movies. It's really, really classic. And so one thing we love to do on this show is look at clips and take meaning out of it. But before we jump into the first one, I'd love to hear your history with the Andy Griffith show. When did you start watching it? And any meaningful, is there a meaningful part of that show, like whether you watch it with family or anything like that?
I mean, I'm a child of the 70s and a teenager of the 80s. And so that show is from, the early 60s, I think, like 62, 63, 64, that
Yeah.
kind of range. And so, I watched it in reruns when I was a young child. I do remember watching it, not like on a regular basis, like I would watch my, cartoons or other particular shows, but I definitely watched it a fair amount. And, it takes place in what's supposed to be North Carolina. And Andy Griffith is from, I believe, Mount Airy, North Carolina.
Yeah.
And I am in North Carolina right now.
Oh, nice.
I'm not from North Carolina. I was born in Virginia, but my father and his whole family, my whole like dad's side of the family is from North Carolina, probably just about an hour away from where Andy Griffith was
that's
from.
awesome.
And so that kind of that Southern culture, I grew up with just understanding that because that was my father. And I think my dad liked the show too. And and then I watched it. I had a better understanding. It was funnier in the 80s. When I was a little bit older, I
Yeah.
still would watch it occasionally in reruns. And then at that point, I had already seen Happy Days. And so it was like cute that like Ron Howard was like, oh yeah, Ron Howard was Opie. And,
Yeah.
now he did Happy Days. And now he's like, he was on his way up. But
Yeah.
but it's interesting because I haven't thought about this show in a really, really long
Mm.
time. But my dad passed away in September of just
Mm.
2023, and my mom
Sorry to
passed
hear
away.
that.
Yeah, it's been hard. Grief
Um,
is I
yeah.
still am getting gut punched with
Yeah.
grief. He was
Mm.
so awesome. But my mom passed away in 2020, and
Yeah.
so it's kind of, I have three siblings, and it's
Yeah.
very surreal. I mean, and I'm at an age too where your parents do, this is happening, with my generation, but it doesn't make it expected or easy. It still just sucks, and it's so hard. And I had a memory though, about the Andy Griffith show. I was at my dad's house. I want to say it was December 2022, I guess
Mhm.
it would have to have been. My dad died in September of 2023. So in
Mhm.
December, I was visiting my dad. It was just me
Mhm.
hanging with him at his house, and we both sat back in these easy chairs in his den, and we turned on the TV, and the Andy Griffith show was on.
Mm.
And we just sat there together, and we just, what there was like a whole block of these episodes. And they weren't like, my dad had like real still like cable TV or something.
Mhm.
He didn't know he didn't know how to use a cell phone or like
Yeah.
anything about streaming. And
Mhm.
so it was literally on some channel, like on the Cox cable network. And
Yeah.
I just remember this experience of calm and just feeling so happy
Mm.
and just sitting there with my dad. And I posted about it on social media like
Yeah.
that day or the next day about how, like, and I think took a shot, like I took a picture of the
Yeah.
TV with whatever episode we were watching. I'm going to have to find that. I'm pretty sure I
Yeah.
posted it on Facebook and just said, like, there is nothing better than just hanging with your dad watching reruns of the Andy Griffith show. And so that was what I posted. But I also remember one of the episodes in particular. I started talking to my dad about it, and I was like, wow, like Andy Griffith was really like ahead of his time in terms of I don't know. I'll just leave it there for now.
Mhm.
He was, in
Sure.
my opinion, I just had this revelation in that moment. I had never thought about it before that, but sort of, as an older, middle-aged person now with grown
Mhm.
kids, and I've had my fair share of divorced and just all kinds
Mhm.
of, upheaval and change in my life. It was just coming to it with fresh eyes as a middle-aged adult
Yeah.
in, 2022. I was like, wow, the show is like 50, no, 60 years old.
Yeah.
It would have been 60 years old, and it's aged pretty decently. Some
Yeah.
things don't age well. And
Mhm.
that, like Mr. Rogers or whatever
Yeah.
has like this sort of universal wisdom that I
Yeah.
think on some levels is never going to go out of style.
Mhm. Yeah, agreed. Just that's a beautiful story with you and your dad. Um, and that's one thing I always try to push is like for me, shows have always connected me to the world. And Andy Griffith was one of two shows I watched with my dad. The Simpsons was the other one. I always tell people like when I was younger, The Simpsons was like, oh, you watch The Simpsons,
Yeah.
but that my dad was a construction worker. He was kind of that like no show emotion, and I was all
Right.
emotion. So we had a little bit of a strained relationship. But when we watched The Simpsons, we were bonded.
Yeah. Oh,
But
that's awesome.
yeah, and I feel like that kind of with the Andy Griffith because he's the one who got me into it.
Yeah.
And me and my brother fell in love with Don Knotts. Loved him. watched every
Yeah.
movie of his. And
Did you see his cameos when he did like Scooby-Doo had like in the set 1970s Scooby-Doo always had guest stars, and Don Knotts was on like I swear he was in multiple episodes.
Yeah, we saw that one too, and we geeked out about it. So anywhere we could find Don Knotts, we're
Three's
like,
Company.
Oh, I don't know if I saw that one. I just
Oh
said
my
we
God,
said
you have to check out. You're just probably a little too young for it. Three's Company is such a good show, and it is
Yeah.
like John Ritter is like a comic genius.
Yes.
It's such a good show. It's from the late 70s, early 80s. You need to check out Three's Company. The
Okay.
earlier episodes, the earlier seasons, Don Knotts is not on those. They have they have landlords, and their landlords are the Ropers, Mr. and Mrs. Roper, Stanley and Helen. But then they eventually leave the show, I think, because they did a spin-off show called The Ropers. And so Don Knotts comes on to the show, and he is their new landlord, and his name is Mr. Furley.
Oh, awesome.
And so he would have been on there like, probably like 79, 80, 81. I don't know. In the early 80s, you check it out.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a really funny show.
I've definitely heard a lot about it. And I think the most is through Futurama, where Fry tries to get out of situations by going through episodes of Three's Company. He's like, okay.
Oh my gosh, wow.
But cool. Speaking of how like Andy Griffith is, still holds up. So the first clip I was going to have us look at, I think is very relatable to today. And I'm just going to play it and let it explain for itself. The only thing I'll say is Barney just pulled somebody over and is kind of trying to explain it like, hey, this is why I pulled you over. So here's that clip.
Gomer, try to look at it from my side, will you? You see, you broke the law. Now, let me finish. Now, it's from little misdemeanors that major felonies grow. And it's my duty, it's anybody's duty, to stop them before they get too far. Now, the law must be upheld. Now, if I, as just plain John Doe, an ordinary citizen, were to see you making a U-turn, I'd have to make a citizen's arrest. Gomer, you'll be a better man if you'll try to think of us all working together for a common cause. All right, everybody, break it up. Let's go back to your homes and places of business. Come on, break it up. Let's go. Stop, Barney, stop. This is the riot. This is the riot. This is the riot. What are you yelling about?
Like you said, you broke the law by making an illegal U-turn, and I hereby, as a citizen of the town of Mayberry in the United States of America, arrest you.
Hooray! I love when he's like, I hereby arrest you, and the whole crowd just cheers.
I know. And Gomer Pyle too. His accent reminds me so much of my North Carolina family. They really sounded like that. But anyway, they're just comic foils for each other, Barney and Gomer Pyle.
Yeah, exactly. And when I think about this, there's so many areas to think about. I think one, it's like super obvious, is like accountability and authority figures like police officers and all that stuff. But what I started thinking about it when I was reading your book, at one point you talked about, you're struggling with this anxiety, and you're like, you're probably wondering, why should you listen to me about this? And it's because of that relatability. This is why I do the show, because I always reference other shows. So there's a Scrubs episode where Dr. Cox and Elliot are treating similar types of patients. Elliot's patient is really thin, and they're about the same weight. So Dr. Cox is like, because I think Elliot called out Dr. Cox for being a hypocrite, but Dr. Cox eventually shows her like, the big thing is that we help them.
Yeah.
That's why we're here. And I think about like with my kids, I tell them to eat healthy. I'm terrible at that.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious for you, like as a professor and all that stuff, not always having it everything to go together? When do you feel like is a good time to say, hey, I still need to hold you accountable? And when is it? Yeah.
That was as a professor. And the more I acknowledged my own mental health issues and started actually being vulnerable and upfront about that with my students, and, which I think, would be frowned upon by some people. And in another era, or still maybe at another university today, fortunately, the university where I worked and the colleagues with whom I worked, it was not a toxic environment. It was it was a great place to work.
Yeah.
I had students come to me with, disability accommodations every semester for ADHD, for dyslexia, for mental health related issues, for their anxiety. And, I had to, and I had no issues at all granting these accommodations. But what I also realized is that college is really stressful, and I was often asking my students to do assignments, a certain amount of reading, or turn in something by a certain date, that I knew I would not be capable of doing myself. Not that I wasn't capable of it, but, with my neurodivergent brain, I've always kind of accepted myself as a neurodivergent person. I have a panic disorder, and I have anxiety and depression diagnoses, and, was on medication for that, but I did not know that I had ADHD at the time. And I just felt like such a hypocrite. I felt like I was constantly asking my students to do things that I would not be able to do myself. And sometimes I justified it with, well, I don't have to do that now because I'm not in college anymore. This is kind of like just what you do. But, I just basically reached a point where it was a lot of prep on my part, but whenever I assigned reading in my last several years of teaching, I would make sure that I actually read everything that I assigned my students first.
Yeah.
Even though I'd read it before, I would make sure that I read it again, and I would time myself so that I knew how long. And most of the stuff that I was teaching was in French. And so I knew that if I could read something, in 30 minutes, that them just being students and not being fluent speakers and readers of French, it's probably going to take them at least twice as long, to get through a heavy text. And so I started just going a little easier that way. But I also, I just started accepting late work. And I think that for some of my colleagues, that was scandalous, because everybody had on their syllabi, it was like, what's your late penalty? Is it 10% off or whatever? And I just was like, can you submit late work? Yes, you can. Is there a penalty? No, there's not. Because in my mind, if you just say, sorry, you're getting a 0, that's your consequence. You're denying the students an opportunity to learn. They're gonna, if they really want to get a 0 and they're really not intending to do the work, they're not gonna submit it.
Yeah.
Even late. They're not even going to submit it late.
Yeah.
But if you give students the time that they need, or you just realize that, like, they have so much shit going on, and, that, they're good people, they mean well. If they have an excuse, I don't know. I just had to change the entire way that I approached teaching. And basically I would just say, you know what, if you want to give it to me, I'm gonna take it. Now, what I would tell them is, depending on how late you give it to me, you may or may not get my eyes on it for real. I'll give you some credit, but I can't just be like taking random late work all over the place either. I had to build in some kind of accountability, but I accepted late work. And, if I was able to, I would give them feedback and, give them a grade on it. But the other radical thing that I did in recent years is I didn't we did ungrading. I didn't have grading in my class. I just read a lot of research about it and just realized that grades were they were detrimental to students' mental well-being, and students were just focused on grades and not on learning. And I just was like, grades promote power structures and hierarchy. And, basically I'm just gonna, just gonna like, if you do your work, the university's still going to make me give you a grade. I still have to give you a grade for the university, but in my class, basically, if you do the work, you're going to get an A. If you do what is required of you, you're going to get an A. And so, not everybody got A's because not everybody can and will do what's actually required of them. But, grades are, to a large degree, whether we acknowledge it or not, they're subjective. So
Totally. I don't have enough time to dissect how cool that is. But I kind of think I love the comparison between like Barney, who's like kind of wielding his authority a little bit and like, you need to do this. And then I think it's quicker for people to turn on you when you're having that, like, you have to be perfect. And I imagine that you being that kind of professor, students probably offered you more grace too.
They really did. When both of my parents, my dad, I was quit already, but when my mom died and when I had like some kind of mental break, something happened at some point that was serious. And I had two different instances. When my mom died, my students were like, don't worry, they call me Dr. G. Don't worry, Dr. G, like you've been here for us so much, like the whole time. And now we're going to be here for you. And that happened again when some major shit crisis happened in my life. I can't remember what it was, but I was very upfront with my students about it. I think I might've just been experiencing like some kind of, I was just struggling. And I told them, I said, I'm not going to like lie and say like, oh, I have to pick up my daughter from daycare, which I did a lot of that kind of bullshit earlier in my career. When my kids were younger, I, used my kids all the time as excuses when I was not doing mentally well. And it's just such a good feeling when but that's what community is all about.
Right.
And honestly, it's you establishing a solid community. And I think that's one of my favorite things actually about the Andy Griffith show is just the community and how it always comes back to, and Andy Griffith is like the professor who himself, he's the one that like just, he creates that strong community, and makes it known that like, everyone's welcome here and like, don't be an asshole. Like it's not okay to like treat people like crap,
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I'm also kind of remembering of, I used to work at this job and there's this executive who just nobody liked. He was very hard on everybody, but he didn't live that. And it finally got to the point where like 4 managers were like, either he goes or I go. And so they finally investigated and were like, oh yeah, this guy's like messing with the budget in not good ways. He's doing all this stuff. So they let him go. And it was pretty much a similar reaction to what the crowd was on there, where people were pretty much like, yay. And I was like, and that was a lesson for me to be like, I need to be aware of myself and make sure I'm a good leader. And that's one thing they say, you'll be able to tell what kind of leader you are when you're in trouble and if people have your back or not.
Yeah. Actually, in the research that I did for the book, for my book on self-deprecating humor, that is one thing that I did learn is that leaders in particular and people in supervisory and, bosses and those types of positions were just way more liked and respected by their employees if they were self-deprecating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I always like when I learn stuff like that and I've done that. I'm like, oh, I'm a natural. Just feels nice. So now we'll go into a second clip that kind of goes into just, with leadership, not judging anyone. So here is a clip where, again, Barney is kind of the guy who's at the center of this.
Hey, wait a minute, Rafe. Hey, Barn, why don't you take Rafe along to them singing tryouts?
Huh? Rafe?
How about it, Rafe? Wouldn't hurt none.
What are y'all talking about?
They're having singing tryouts over at the town hall. Why don't you go sing for them?
Oh, I couldn't do that.
Why not?
Go! Because he just couldn't, that's why. You're right to refuse, Rafe. I'm surprised at you, Andy.
Well, what's wrong?
Well, what's wrong is that Rafe don't have no trained singing voice. That's what's wrong. You want to get up there with the rest of us and make a fool out of yourself, Rafe? They're liable to ask you questions only a trained musician understands.
Like what?
Well, suppose they was to ask you, can you sing a cappella? Would you know what to do?
No.
Well, there you are. Why get up and embarrass yourself?
Hey, Barn, suppose they asked you if you can sing a cappella. What'll you do?
Well, I'd do it. A cappella, a cappella. I don't know the rest of the words.
I see. Barn, I think all they want is to find out how good a voice you got. Now, why don't you take Rafe over there and have him sing for him?
You want Rafe here to be embarrassed and humiliated? They want people up there with musical backgrounds.
Well, it's just an idea.
That don't mean you have to stop singing, Rafe. You just go ahead and do it. You sing in the bathtub, don't you? Well, you can go right ahead and do that.
There's a little bit, I love that he's almost offended at Andy for suggesting that. When he's like, no, he's like, you're right to say no. Andy, I'm a little surprised at you.
Well, yeah. I mean, like, if you've, I've seen that episode. I've seen these full episodes many times. I haven't watched, I don't know when the last time I saw those was, but if I'm not mistaken, I think in that episode, I feel like Barney is, maybe he auditions for the choir. Do you, I can't remember.
So I don't remember if I've seen this, but just my amount of TV, I'm guessing, when I already forgot the guy's name, goes, he probably crushes it and probably outperforms Barney, but.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think what we see in that little clip that you just showed is pretty common with the character of Barney.
Yeah.
There are a lot of things going on there, but like Barney is like, clearly he's just like, poor thing. He's insecure.
He's
just insecure. So he has to he kind of has to make other people, he belittles other people, or, is constantly like abusing his power, as much power as Barney Fife can have, like we saw in the Gomer Pyle one, he means well, but, he sort of always ends up being the butt of the joke. But then Andy is like, what I love about Andy Griffith overall, and I bet you could probably pick this out of any episode you watch of that show, but especially in that clip you just showed, is like, Andy is like, how do I articulate it? It's like, he is not above anyone. Like, and I think he wants to make that point that like, we're all equal. And, I'd have to go back and I'd be curious to see how they explore race, given the time, because that was it was like pre-raging civil rights movement. It was right at that era. I'd be curious to see, go back to those episodes and see how many episodes have Black people on them, African Americans, because that I would definitely be curious to see. But otherwise, I think Andy Griffith, he just embodies like, be kind. And just like, don't be a jerk, just be kind, and we're all in this together. And I don't know,
that's what I love about what you're saying. It reminds me of a Ted Lasso line, well, technically Walt Whitman line, of be curious, not judgmental. And I love you came in not being like, Barney's a jerk, but like, no, here's why. And it's easy to I always like
Barney's
this.
struggling. He's got
Yeah.
mental health issues. He's anxious and insecure.
Yeah, exactly. And so I really like that perspective of just, looking at it with different lens. Because I always like the saying, we judge ourselves by our intentions, we judge others by their actions.
Yep.
And so so it's all very cool. Is there anything else you want to cover before we start wrapping up?
No, I'm good.
Okay, so before we wrap up, I asked 3 guests 3 questions. First question is, which clip did you think was funniest?
I think the first clip was funny. I think that was the funnier one. I'm probably biased, but I freaking love Jim Neighbors. I love Gomer Pyle. I love that character.
Yeah.
I was a huge fan as a kid of the Gomer Pyle show. That was like a spinoff or whatever, but like, I don't know, just the two of them together, were just like, butting heads. He basically, Gomer Pyle, stripped Barney of his power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. That episode
took him down a notch.
Right, exactly. That episode I did see. For me, it's the second clip. That's actually where I got the inspiration for the bit where Barney's like, oh, what would you do if they asked you to sing a cappella when he actually doesn't know either?
Yeah.
Second question is, which clip did you feel like we got more out of?
I don't know. I mean, honestly, I wouldn't say one more than the other.
Oh.
I would say in both of those clips. I mean, I was talking about, Andy being like a great community builder.
Yeah.
But honestly, like, you can see the power of that community. It's a little cheesy in that first clip. Like, it's so like, hooray, it's a little like, oh, okay, that's not like great acting. It's a little cheesy, but what you have there is you have the power of community and the power of, the power of the people, and what happens when you have a strong community, all those people are going to have your back.
Yeah. I'm going to agree. This is a Joe time first too, that they're both equal. And then final question, if we had to do a deep dive, if we had to pick one of these clips and just really analyze it, which clip would you want to do?
Oh, I would totally do the first one.
Yeah, I agree. I think we'd get so much out of it.
There's so much like, it would go super deep with, abuse of power in the police forces today, and just, I don't know.
Yeah.
Just powers, hierarchical structures and abuse of power. That's
agreed. 100% agree. So, and then to finally wrap up, I talked a little bit about this at the beginning, the Overthinking Chronicles. Can you tell everybody where to get that and where to find you? Because I'm guessing a lot of people are going to be like, whoa, Sarah's really cool. I'd love to reach out to her. Where can people find you?
So you can find me on Instagram at my business account, which is sarcastic.self.care. And that is sarcastic is a word I like to think I made up. I probably did not make it up, but it's a combination between the words sarcastic and crass, because that's how I've always seen myself.
Yeah.
So it's sarcastic, sarcastic.self.care. The book, what you should know about the book is that I have a pen name, which is Sarah. It's Sarah Tonenstan. So my name is Sarah Glasco. My pen name is Sarah Tonenstan, which is a pun.
Yeah, it was, you told me.
Stan, my teacher. But my pen name is not a secret. Like, a lot of people, and you'll discover that if you get my book, I talk about that in the epilogue. But a lot of people have pen names. Why do I have a pen name? A lot of people have pen names because they are explicitly, purposefully trying to hide their real identity. They don't want their real identity revealed. And The only reason I have a pen name, it's very simple. It's because I'm already a published academic author. I have a lot of I published a book in academia as well. I'll show you that one too. It's probably in this room somewhere with me.
Yeah.
But I have a lot of academic publications. And so this is my new trajectory in life. I'm sort of doing what I'm calling like anxiety humor, mental health humor, ADHD humor. And I, it's like self-help humor. And that I think using my real name for these books, I think would just be really confusing for potential new readers. So that's the only reason. So if you look it up, you have to look up Sarah, Serotonin Stan, the Overthinking Chronicles. It is available on the Overlords of Late Stage Capitalism, Amazon.com. And that is the only place right now that you can get it. That's because it was just released. It will be, and it's Kindle, or, you don't have to have a Kindle. The ebook you can read on any device. You don't have to have a Kindle to buy the ebook on Amazon, but it's, there's a paperback and there's a hardback as well, but it will be available from all your other friendly booksellers, and Barnes and Noble and all that stuff in the coming months. But for the first, I had to start with Amazon because, for better or for worse, that's where the majority of, readers and, I have to make a living where my potential for supporting myself is going to come from. So Amazon, yes.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. I'll put all this in the show notes so you guys can just go right to the links, find it. It's again, for me, it hit home. It's great. You'll love it. And and I think, Sarah, you're doing a great service. I think you've already done so many great services for humanity. And for me, it's always so fun to meet cool people. And I always like the line.
Likewise.
Thanks. I always like the line. There's no neutral interactions. You either leave people better or worse than you found them. You've left me better. So thank you so much for being. Oh, shucks. Thanks. Thank you so much for being on here. I can't say thank you enough. And for everybody else, we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I mean, I just don't get it. I had the script right in front of me. All I had to do was read it and see that she was saying, "Oh, you're a professor. It's on the script." How did I not get that? I mean,